I am Anna Sewell, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about growing ourselves while raising our children. I'm a psychologist, educator, and parent coach. My mission is to end violence against children. Through my work and this podcast, I help parents break generational cycles of trauma, reconnect with their authentic selves, and raise emotionally healthy children. Together, we've built a global community of conscious parents who want something different for the next generation. Join us as we create a more peaceful, kind, and compassionate world. Today, how to understand and transform your emotions. Most of us were never taught how to work with our emotions, so we avoid them, push them down, or get overwhelmed by them. But if we truly want to raise emotionally healthy children, we also need to learn how to feel, manage our own emotions, how to regulate our own emotions. Today, I am talking with Hillary Jacobs Handel. She is a licensed clinical social worker, IEDP certified psychotherapist, supervisor, and author of It's Not Always Depression and Parents Have Feelings Too. Hillary introduces us to a very simple yet powerful tool called the change triangle. Now, if you've never heard about the change triangle, you're in for a treat. The change triangle helps us understand and work with our emotions. The change triangle shows us that emotions aren't the problem. They are information your body gives you, signals that tell you what matters, what you need, and how to act with more calm, clarity, and connection. Instead of hiding from feelings, you can learn to feel them clearly, use them wisely, and develop real emotional mastery. If you've ever wondered why you react the way you do, how to feel your emotions without getting hijacked by them, or how to come back to yourself more quickly, this episode is for you. Before we get to today's episode, I want to mention that I have done an entire series back in 2018 on the podcast all about different emotions. I'll link to those episodes in the show notes, so please refer to them, go back and listen to them. I highly recommend. There is a fantastic episode called Anger with Russell Kolts, another one with Todd Kashdan called The Upside of Your Dark Side. I have done an episode on fear, on crying and tears, on anxiety. In fact, multiple episodes on anxiety. There is another episode we have done called The Benefits of Negative Emotions. We've done episodes on happiness and many others. So I'll have a big list of older episodes for you to devour. And now, please enjoy and thank you for listening. Hillary, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Anna. I'm thrilled to be here talking with you.
I am so excited to meet you and talk about emotions. I think we all know how emotions are important, but we're scared of them. We don't want to feel the uncomfortable ones. We see in our children, we don't know how to help them. So this is a hot topic for all of us, especially for parents. And we know that our children borrow our nervous system. We have to be calm and regulated. And how do we get there? So let's talk about the role of emotions, I think, in general, and core emotions, and why you became so interested in this topic in the first place. Were you raised in an emotion-friendly home?
Yes. Okay, great. Because it's so relevant, as most of us who do this work have some basis of personal experience. I was actually born and raised in New York City And I had a father who was a psychiatrist and a mother who was a guidance counselor in her first career. So we grew up with a lot of psychological thinking and thought. And we talked about things like anxiety, when I was a teenager and I would feel stressed, and my mother would be so helpful. But what we didn't talk about was emotions per se directly. It was not, in fact, when I got older and was going to begin studying psychotherapy, or even younger, when I was interested in all sorts of psychological processes, like emotions were still in my household considered kind of a new age, kind of a BS thing, that it wasn't like intellectual, and it wasn't, what every one of us that is listening right now to you, we were all likely raised with a pick yourself up by your bootstraps mentality, that we were supposed to be able to use strength and sheer will to move past our emotions and to be logical beings, which of course is also important to do. But what I learned, sadly, at the age of 39, when I went back to school to become a psychotherapist, and by just random chance ended up in a conference on emotions and neurobiology and affective neuroscience, all these jargony words for really how emotions work in the mind and body. It was the first time I ever learned concrete things about emotions. Like, the first thing that blew me away was that you can't control emotions, that they are evolutionarily designed survival programs that we have to make us move in ways that promote survival and thriving. So the idea that emotions were normal processes that were okay to have, and not only were they okay, they just were, and there was nothing we could do except once we had them, we could work with them, but we couldn't stop them from happening. That was so liberating for me, Anna, because I had worked so hard to, quote, not be an angry person, to not get sad, which upset my mother, to not be afraid and admit that I was afraid, and all these things that in a moment I felt the relief and then the fascination. Well, if there's something to learn about emotions, I wanted to learn everything about them. And it turns out that there's a tremendous amount of science and clinical research that teaches us all about emotions and how to be with them so we don't bury them, which then causes them to come out sideways in all sorts of common symptoms like anxiety and depression. So my world just blew open when I first was exposed to this triangle that we're going to talk about a little bit, this tool to show that how emotions work in the mind and body. And it's something every single one of us needs to know, like reading and math. It's basic emotional literacy.
Yeah. I was going to say, I wish they can teach this in schools.
Yes, well, and they should. And really in like high school biology or high school health class, they teach, I went to Bronx High School of Science, so I had a great science education. And then afterwards, I was a biochemistry major. I was a complete science nerd. And in biology, they teach you that you have a heart and lungs and an esophagus. And that's important to know. But emotions affect every single one of us every day. And what we do with them has huge consequences for how our lives turn out from an emotional health, a mental health, behavioral standpoint, cognitive standpoint, that you would think if we're learning about that we have a heart and stomach, we should also learn just a few things about emotions that will help us navigate these painful forces that we suffer from for the rest of our life. And there's stuff to know.
Yeah, you said something interesting. I want to linger a little bit on this phrase. You said work with them, right? Work with emotions. I think there's two things, being with emotions and working with them. I feel like before we work with them, we need to be with them, right? And most of us are sort of taught to move on too fast and work through them. And, I'm anxious, help, relieve this pain that I'm feeling, or I'm feeling loss and grief and sadness. I don't want to feel this, right? We want to always to move faster than it needs to be. Whereas when you be with them, then how you work with them will the path will open up for you. So many of us are like wanting to work with them, but I feel like not much emphasis is placed on just be with your feelings. You don't have to fix them, change them, or work with them. What can you say about this a little bit?
Yes, so like the concept, if someone would have said to me, and I'm imagining the listeners out there that are with us right now being like, be with my emotions. I don't want to feel my emotions. They hurt and they scare me, and I feel overwhelmed and out of control. And so I guess like the epiphany that I had through becoming an emotion-centered psychotherapist, first, before I started writing, is that, and it was about me personally, because I was learning step by step kind of strategies and tools for how to be with emotions in myself and my patients, I was much more able to do that. I wasn't as scared because I was learning and watching videotape, because that's how we learn in AEDP, which is the type of psychotherapy that I do, that I am so passionate about, along with the emotions education. I can't say enough positive stuff about AEDP. But that learning, for example, that emotions and these things called core emotions, because we want to differentiate two main categories of emotions. These things called core emotions, which are body-based survival programs that I mentioned. And then this other class of emotions that is they're inhibitory emotions. Shame, anxiety, and guilt push down the core emotions for good reasons. And there's a constant tension between core emotions that want to come up and be validated and released in the body, and core emotions which push them down so we can stay connected to people and stay in the good graces of our groups and communities. But just by learning that, let's take sadness, which while I had this really wonderful, loving, patient mother, regulated person in general, she did not like sadness. And so when a parent doesn't like a certain emotion, the child learns very quickly not to show that emotion. One, they don't have help with it. So for example, when my dog died and I was 11, I was already, instead of feeling sad, feeling anxious about death. And my mom would try to kind of cheer me up. And what we were collectively avoiding together at that time is, what is it like to be with sadness? And for one, it's knowing that it's normal, that when you lose something like a pet or a person or even a cherished possession, it's a biological program that lets us know we were connected to something, right? So without sadness, we really wouldn't love. It's sort of that polarity between the two. And so being with sadness would be learning at a young age from a parent, and the parent knowing it's okay to be with sadness. So what that means is you don't change the subject. You don't try to cheer someone up quite yet. You name and hold space for that feeling. So my mother could have said, oh, it's a very sad, sad thing to lose a pet. It's a really hard and painful feeling to bear. And that's why, I'm here with you. We'll bear it together. It will pass. This feeling is temporary. Let me hug you. Let me hold you while you cry. All these things that make experiencing something less painful because we're not alone with it. And in fact, most of the problems that the adults that I see have buried emotions because there was not enough support with parents with emotional know-how and parents that could be present with feelings to allow for that deep knowledge to be felt and learned and carried forth to the next generation. So being with an emotion begins really with our parents and how they taught us through osmosis, to be able to that it's okay to feel this painful feeling and it will pass and it's important and you matter. So that's really.
How was your mom so regulated then if she was, I guess she was suppressing all her feelings? Did she ever get angry or like, No?
Not at me. She was unwaveringly loving and supportive and encouraging. She was a one in a million. She was really, and I think my theory, she was basically regulated. But the sadness for her, as I got older, like, and in the last year, she died a couple of years ago, and in like the last 10 years, when I was 20 years learning about AEDP and emotions, and we're trained, to really, it's not so much what people say, it's tracking nonverbal in the here and now. I could see as my mother had to process her own sadness from getting older and the loss of being able to do her career, which she loved so much, and the loss of really being able to leave her home. She was sick for a while. I could see the tension around, the facial expressions around like letting herself cry and the shame that she felt from feeling so vulnerable. I think she liked to be strong. She was used to feeling confident and strong. And so there was some shame in the way that I talk about it in the book. It's not always depression, and parents have feelings too, where we use shame to push down a core emotion like sadness. So, and what's interesting, the reason I saw the change triangle, which I extracted from the academic literature as a self-help tool, is because once I saw and learned that my anxiety was covering up my sadness and how that led to a whole bunch of bad decisions. We need to feel our sadness to really function well in life and in relationships and whatnot. Once I saw that anxiety covers up core sadness, and I learned what sadness was supposed to feel like a heaviness in the chest, feeling of wanting to cry, and I learned the techniques to allow it, like deep breathing, mostly deep breathing and focusing on the physical sensations to allow it to come up. It got rid of all the inhibition learning about it, and I was able to learn to feel my sadness really without the help of a therapist. It was really a self-help endeavor. I would say that's not the same with other emotions that I had to, like other symptoms I had to deal with, like perfectionism in my second marriage and not being as selfless as I thought and being afraid to ask for what I needed, or being angry at certain people and feeling okay about my anger. I needed a therapist to help me with that. But for sadness, I really learned to process on my own as an adult and knowing what to do. Yeah.
Have you ever wondered what it would be like to work with me? I offer one-on-one parent coaching, court-ordered parenting classes, and co-parenting counseling, available to anyone, anywhere. Visit authenticparenting.com to learn more. And as a listener of this podcast, you'll get 10% off all coaching packages. I want to ask you so many questions, but I think the first one I want to ask is, what are the core emotions? Let's list the core emotions and tell me a little bit about the shape of the triangle and what each angle stands for.
Yes, and I absolutely will. I would encourage everybody who's at a computer now listening to just put in a Google search for the change triangle so you can see it, or mark it to do later on, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. But it's an upside down triangle, and the three corners and the place underneath it, which is a regulated nervous system, basically at any given moment of the day, we're going to be on one of these four places on the triangle. And knowing where we are tells us what to do to get to a better place. So the core emotions, which are at the bottom of the triangle, and they're really at the bottom of the triangle. I guess imagine this upside down triangle superimposed on your body, with the point being somewhere between, like a little bit above your belly button. And the point, and then it kind of comes up with the top of the triangle being like above your shoulders, nearer to your head. And that helps because the core emotions are physical, body-based programs. They're sadness, anger, fear, disgust, joy, excitement, and sexual excitement, which I don't talk much about in the book because I wanted it to be G-rated. And each of those core emotions has a unique program for action, again, that's meant to help us survive. So we have anger so that we can know when somebody has hurt or violated us, either our physical, our skin, hurting or hitting us, punching us, hopefully not, or insulting our ego or our sense of self, right? So something like that happens, or someone bumps into me on the streets of New York City, and I'm going to get that sudden rise because these core emotions are fast acting programs. We couldn't stop them. They happen too fast. Even, we all want to stop them, but we can't stop them. Our senses pick up these things in the environment, goes right into the middle of our brain in the limbic system, which then activates not our thinking brain, because we're not having conscious control yet. Emotions get triggered. It activates the lower brain, the vagus nerve, which connects to virtually every organ in the body, to get that organ and our whole body ready for a specific action. Like anger gets us ready for a fight, and sadness gets us ready to slow down and grieve, and fear gets us ready to run to safety, and joy gets us ready to kind of lean in and connect on the things that make us happy and bring us relief and that lovely feeling inside our body. And excitement gets us ready to go near that which is stimulating to us and interesting to us. And so all these emotions have a place, and we've evolved to have them because they help us in some way. That's the bottom of the triangle. And once a core emotion gets ignited, there's basically two choices. We can suppress that emotion, in which case we move up the change triangle, and the two corners at the top are these inhibitory emotions I mentioned early. They push down core emotions in service of pleasing others, basically. And then when the feeling of these core emotions, which are pushing up constantly for expression, and the inhibitory emotions are pushing him down through muscular contraction and this inward retraction and withdrawal and kind of isolation in the mind. When that all feels so crummy inside the body, very painful, that we move over the top left-hand corner of the triangle to what we're calling defenses, but not in the pejorative way that I kind of learned about them in my psychoanalytic training. In AEDP, defenses are the brilliant and creative ways that we spare ourselves emotional discomfort and pain. And we do these in a myriad of ways, from when we look at our phone to kind of de-stress at the end of the day, to going for a drink, up into doing heroin, which it's a defense that's dangerous because you become addicted and you can destroy your life, but it's a defense that works really well. It immediately numbs you out. So we have to understand these defenses for the protection that they provide, and then consciously decide that we don't want to do that anymore, and we want to work our way back down the triangle to core emotions, learn how to move them up and out of the body. And that's when we enter that space at the bottom of the triangle called the open-hearted state of the authentic self, which is a regulated nervous system where we feel calm and connected and like, this is me. This is the me that I love and want to be. And we're constantly moving around and up and down the triangle all day long. And the goal, really, of this work is to spend more and more time in the open-hearted state and to get there quicker when we're blown off course by the many triggers and emotionally laden events that happen in a normal life, cause us to suffer.
Yeah, it's a fantastic tool, and visually, and you can see it. And so the inhibitory emotions are shame, guilt, and anxiety, which a lot of people feel, right? We all do. And it's like, gets pathologized even. I have an anxiety disorder, this and that.
Exactly. And this model shows the way to decrease anxiety. It shows the way to decrease depression, which we call a defense. It's on the upper left corner, because it's really like a full body. Depression is like a pushing all the feelings down until you've like depleted your serotonin and you can barely move. But there's all this energy is being used to keep emotions down. And when I work with people to help them feel the anger they had from their childhood, when their parents neglected them or mistreated them or even neglected emotionally, all sorts of things that parents don't mean to do, they do it often unwittingly out of ignorance because they don't have an emotion education. And that's why I find the change triangle to be a public health tool for parents, just to understand how emotions work so they don't unwittingly create shame and anxiety in their kids because they don't know how to make space for emotions, as we just talked about.
Can we talk about anger then as a core emotion? I think anger is a difficult one for a lot of people. They don't want to feel angry. They don't want to be associated as an angry person, woman, you name it. We don't want to feel it. But it's energizing, right? Anger has a purpose. All the emotions have a purpose. They're there. I like how you said several minutes ago, each emotion, like we make decisions based on how we feel. And when the inhibitory emotion comes, we make a decision based off of that. And that leads us to somewhere else, which can be an inauthentic decision that we have to live for the rest of our life. And it could be costly in so many ways. Not all decisions are like that, but it's so good to be in tune with the concept of authentic self, I think, is an important one, because what is the authentic self? I think it's being in tune with your authentic core emotions and making decisions based on them, right? Because then you have a more authentic life, open-hearted life. But when we make decisions, and all of us do, based on the inhibitory emotions, it just doesn't feel good in the moment. It doesn't feel good later. It doesn't feel right.
Right. It doesn't feel right. Right. And I think, I just want to sort of shift one thing you said. Because it's people are like, I can just hear them saying, we don't necessarily want to make decisions with our core emotions either. That the way that I would think of it is we want to listen and move through the core emotions.
Yeah.
And then the very last step is to think through, now that I know what I'm feeling and what I want to happen, and going in the direction of my values and goals, what do I want to do with this feeling in a very intentional way, which is a great entree to talking about anger, because I know that I certainly used to feel like I don't want to feel my anger. I don't want to be mean. I equated my own anger inside my body with the action of being mean and saying hurtful things to someone. And one of I would say the most important things in learning about emotions is to break into two steps. When it comes to core emotions, we want to experience them, which is a wholly internal process. There's no action, there's nothing said. It's, I know I'm angry. Right? How do we experience an emotion? One, we can name it. I know I'm angry. I know what I'm feeling in my body. This anger feels like this huge energy that wants to come up. It wants to be mean. It wants to punch, or it wants to kick, or wants to call you a jerk. I can feel the heat in my body. I've learned and practiced to be able to be in my body while I'm having anger, and what the impulse is. And then in part of experiencing an emotion, we have to have all these kind of ways, tricks and tips and techniques to release that huge amount of energy that can come up, so that I can get my nervous system down to a baseline again. All these core emotions are kind of wave-like. And the ways that in AEDP we help people experience anger is a lot through fantasy, because nobody gets hurt. So I can imagine, and even with a child, I can imagine a child that is making my life a living hell, and still hold my love and empathy, my total 100% love and sympathy and empathy for my child and also know that I am furious because I have no fuel left in my tank and I literally want to kick my kid across the room. Believe it or not, in a therapeutic setting, I can use the fantasy of kicking the kid to help release the anger in the body, to lower the charge, and then it allows more love and empathy and sympathy in. And so that's sort of the last step to experiencing and a feeling is what can I do to get the charge out of it? And that's a creative endeavor, either by yourself or with a therapist. Then I want to think through, let's say in the case that I'm angry with my kid, I really just want to process it so that I can go back in and have patience and be loving, because that's the most important thing, is to be calm and loving and patient with children and to sort of be a presence for wisdom and guidance and undoing aloneness, versus going in and yelling and taking action with that anger at my child and calling him a good for nothing and, why did I have you and my life is a living hell, and you don't want to do that. So the trick here is, how do you work with your own feelings so that you can get back to a place that allows you to honor the values that we have as parents.
I like that how you corrected my thinking there. You're right. We experience so many emotions, but we don't have to act from all of them, right? We have to choose when to act and how to act. I think experiencing the feeling is important, but you don't have to act on all of the emotions that you are experiencing. You can feel all of it, but you don't have to act on all of them.
Exactly. So another example of acting is like my husband may do something that really I don't like. I may be able to recognize, oh, whatever he did made me angry. I know because I have that rush of energy. I feel that heat. And what I want to tell him is, you're a jerk. Don't do that. And once I process it or I imagine doing that and then I calm down a little bit or I take a break, I might decide I am now going to say something. And you remember that time yesterday when you said, you're so dumb for doing that. I might say, use the anger, put it in my backbone and assert, you know what, I don't like you calling me names. I don't really ever want you to call me names again. In fact, it made me very angry, and I don't want to be treated that way. So that's taking the wisdom of the anger and trying to use it and communicate it in a way where it can actually be heard. If I just start shouting and screaming, then he's going to shout and scream, and then it just escalates. So that space to recognize what we're feeling and to think through how to work with emotions doesn't have to be in the moment, because oftentimes everything is running too high. We have to wait till we sleep on it, calm down, can think again. And the combination of feeling and thinking is optimal for emotional and mental health. And it makes sense because it's that midline, the core authentic self really is a midline structure in the middle of the brain and the body that has this sense of, can perceive this is me or I'm having this mood. It can sense what's going on and knows when our body feels right and it knows when our body feels wrong. And there's also a natural healing tendency when we remove obstacles. So we really want to spend more and more time in that authentic self to be able to know what we need and communicate those needs, know what we don't need and communicate that, and be able to process the feelings that are from our past that were kind of left unprocessed and that wreak havoc today. We don't want that to happen.
Instead of acting reactively in the moment or impulsively, taking that time, I think, and then I like that example that you gave, right? You're still bringing up what's important. You're communicating your need, but you've already felt the emotion. You're not reactive in the moment. And the likelihood that the other person will understand and meet your expectation or your need is a lot higher than if you were to react in the moment. I think that's important. And yeah, I think it gives you discernment. That space when you process your feelings gives you space whether this is important to act upon or not. Sometimes taking no action is an action too, right? You don't have to act on all of the emotions. I think that that's a good example. I like that.
Right. And thanks for rephrasing that. You got that exactly right. So, and it's just to normalize all this, it's the hardest thing to do because when emotions are triggered, core emotions like anger, they have impulses. Each of the emotions has these impulses. And if we don't understand that that's happening, they will overtake us if we could. And to pull back, to have that one little space, okay, I know I'm having this huge reaction. I want to, with all my heart and soul, blah, say something, do something. And if I can just pull back the reins, right? And that's where, again, the tools, if I can feel my feet on the ground, which is called grounding, if I can shift into deep belly breathing, if I can just get myself to exit the room and give myself 5 minutes or walk around the block, all these things that we've all heard before, and to just to do it once and then reflect, did this help? It's like building a new habit, but it is the hardest thing in the world. And still, after practicing for 20 years, with my adult children, I feel these impulses to say things because I'm having a feeling like sadness, like you don't call me enough. And I just have learned, just don't speak. Less is more. Let me spend some time with myself. Let me see if this passes. And I have that CBT and all these things. It's really less that thoughts create emotions. It's mostly that when we're having emotions, we have all these thoughts. Why is it that in this moment I felt like I wanted to kill my husband, and yet 3 days later I'm back to normal and I love him again? So it's like all about how emotions are affecting how we think, how our body feels, and our actions that we just want to be aware of, if nothing else. Just the intellectual awareness of what's happening, I have found to be very, very, very useful.
Yeah. And that restraint is powerful. I don't know if you want to call it restraint in the moment when you feel the heat of the emotion. But you zip your mouth, you remove yourself to be with the feeling. I think that's so huge for most of us to learn that. I've definitely learned that as a main skill as a parent, and it serves me so well in other relationships too. In my mind, I still say the hurtful things. I imagine the things. I imagine taking this bottle and hitting you with that bottle. That's what I want to do right now. But I'm not acting on anything. It's all internal. I think practicing that restraint, recognizing that the emotion is happening now, practicing that restraint and removing yourself or feeling your feeling, and then coming back an hour later, 3 hours later, a day later, and speaking from that anger is such a different place to be,
Yes, it's like night and day.
It's night and day. It changes everything as opposed to being impulsive and just blurt out everything. I think that's a sign of emotional immaturity. Like I definitely was that person, very impulsive and when I was little. And it can feel cathartic when you say the hurtful things, when you release that stuff in that moment, even though there is a cost to that relationship or right? You are offending and hurting the other person, but it feels good for you in a sense when you vent and you yell and you scream and you pout. But I feel like as I've gotten older, it's not a useful tool. Like I'm not 3 years old anymore. I cannot be so impulsive and say and vent and, whatever comes to my mind. I can. Do you think that restraint is self-control, or I don't want this to come across as I'm saying this. I don't want this because what your message is feel your emotions, get in touch with your emotions. I don't want people to hear me say that restraint is self-control, that we want to control how we feel. That's not what we're saying.
Right. And it's tricky, Anna, because we're really, I guess what I am saying is that restraint in the moment.
The impulse to act.
Yes. That restraint of that impulse is often a good thing because like the times that I've unleashed, I've always felt guilty afterwards. It's hurt my relationships. You have to do a lot of work to repair. And that when I have restrained myself, over in the last 20 years, learning new things, everything has gotten much, much better. But with that said, for people who can't, because it's like it happens in a split second, Oftentimes there's wounds from our childhood that are so deep and so intense and so protective, that the emotions get triggered and they come up with such a vengeance that we really can't restrain on our own. And I wouldn't want anyone to be hard on themselves, just compassionate, but also wise enough to get help. And that's where an AEDP therapist would be a wonderful thing to look into, because we bury emotions as children when we're left with big feelings in the face of overwhelming aloneness. That's when we get into trouble, and therefore it makes sense that to heal, we need to undo the aloneness, have somebody we trust with us as we feel the feelings, because they're coming from younger parts of us that are too scared and alone to experience the anger or sadness or fear. So that, when it comes to emotions, we have to approach ourselves with the utmost compassion for ourselves. Nobody wants to hurt anyone. Nobody wants to do anything destructive to the self or to others. It's the only way we have figured out how to get any type of relief, and the wisdom to know that we need help is quite important.
Yeah, especially if our children are the recipient of our impulsivity. I think that's when a lot of us parents want to change the patterns. That was the impetus for me to work on my emotions, to become more in tune and not unleash, and practice that restraint and feel my feelings nevertheless. And I'm not going to die. Like, it's uncomfortable, but so what? It's okay. All those feelings are meant for humans. We do have the capacity to feel all of the emotions.
We do. And can I just say, and they're so much less painful when we know how to feel them. For example, when I'm working with somebody that has like very deep, intense sadness, right? And sometimes you can feel the sadness coming up like a wave, and it will switch to anxiety because it's like, this is so painful. How much can I take? And so the kind of anxiety starts to squash it down. But when I'm working with someone and I try to coach them, for example, on how to move through the sadness, I will say something like, drop the storyline and even drop the idea that you're feeling sadness and just focus on that feeling in your chest that's heavy. Just that as you breathe deep breath. So let's say if the sadness is at a 7 from 0 to 10, breathe to an 8 level so that the breath, which I used to hate when people told me to breathe, and now breathing is our main tool to ride the wave of an emotion. Or I might ground someone in, do you feel me with you? Right? As you're feeling this sadness, do you feel me with you? And do you feel yourself? Do you feel the sadness? Do you feel me? And can you breathe? And we're all together just getting you over the wave to the other side. And most core emotions only last about 2 minutes if we don't interrupt them with inhibition. And then on the other side, when you feel that full wave, oh, it feels so much better. And people have experiences like, I can't believe I was holding that in for like 10 years. I got through it, no problem. I feel so proud of myself. I feel so much better. And then that one experience of riding the wave of a core emotion then is the basis for the courage to do it again and again. And all of a sudden, we've got this kind of clear path where we can feel our feelings and move through them and get to the other side, eventually alone without the help of somebody else.
Yeah, I call that emotional flexibility, resiliency, right? That's emotional. It's important to be flexible like that so that you can do it on your own, ride that wave. And it's a great way of being. And I feel like then you start to feel the joy and those other more positive emotions, let's say, fully. Because if you're not allowing yourself to feel the sadness deeply, your inhibitory emotions are jumping in and taking the show, then you don't feel the joy. I definitely can speak from my experience. I think once you feel the sadness and the grief and those other emotions fully, then the joy is also so big because you created, it's the same space. The feeling space is the same space.
Yes.
Your life becomes a lot more richer and fuller and,
Yes, 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 absolutely. Those are the fruits, and those are the fruits that like motivate us to get to the other side. And all you really need is like one experience to see, oh, that's like how that works. Like I can feel this all the way through. I liken it to because when you write about feelings have to be experienced. They're not like intellectual. You can't think your way through emotions, right? That's the bummer of it all. But an experience, how do you when one is writing, and because you write too, when you write, how do you write about an experience that actually is evocative, where I can show someone what it is like to experience a feeling, to get to the other side, and then to have that openness. And it's really through stories, so that in It's Not Always Depression book, you're like a fly on the wall in my practice, where you watch someone go from the top of the triangle, defenses and an inhibition, through a core emotion, and get to the other side where you feel all those yummy, delicious feelings of pride in the self and gratitude and love. But in trying to explain what it feels like to ride the wave of an emotion, one thing that I came up with is that it's much like the experience of stubbing your toe, where you've hit like the corner of the bed, and at first it doesn't hurt, but then you wait for it, and then you feel it, and it starts to grow, and the pain gets bigger and bigger, and you're like, how much of this do I have to endure? How bad is it going to get? Or maybe you could liken it to a stomach cramp too, and then all of a sudden it reaches the crescendo and you start to feel better, and then it's over. And that's a lot like the wave-like nature of feeling core sadness, core anger, core fear, as it moves through the body and dissipates up and out. And that's a scary thing to do for the first time. It's a brand new experience. But once you do it, you trust, because this is all innate biology. It's just how we work, and it's across the board how all humans work, that it's really amazing when you get a taste of this experience.
And I think then the question is, how can we help our children? Because, okay, forget us. We haven't learned this. We're learning this now, but we're raising our kids. Especially a listener who has younger kids, I think, they are the lucky ones, because they get to help their children develop that emotional awareness, attunement, and that flexibility, so that children, when they grow up, they don't have to recover from their childhood,
Right, not as much.
Not as much. Yeah. I think so. How can we help our children with their feelings then? Like, what is required of us as parents?
Yes, so I mean that's the whole thing. Like, to the reason we wrote, Julie Fraga and I, or Dr. Julie Fraga and I wrote Parents Have Feelings Too, was to take the information that I put in It's Not Always Depression and pivot it towards parents. And so the answer to your question is that the best thing that parents can do for their children before they're born is to begin to work on their own emotional life, and to become familiar with which emotions they struggle with. So it's like, if I asked you, how comfortable are you with your own sadness on a scale of 1 to 10? How comfortable are you when somebody you are with is crying and experiencing deep grief? How comfortable are you with your own anger? How comfortable are you when somebody right in your same room is saying how angry they are, not at you, but at somebody else? Like, can you bear these feelings? And when you ask yourself these questions, that's a quiz. I think we put a quiz in the new book, but in the old book there's a quiz, because that's it kind of gets your own curiosity to where my work needs to be. So when we can only allow our children's emotions, or only be with another person's emotions, to the extent that we can tolerate our own. It's reciprocal. It goes hand in hand. So I would just, suggest that all parents learn the change triangle, whether you learn it from one of the two books or whether you are a therapist and you learn it from AEDP or you learn it from podcasts or researching online or a class, because I write curricula too for people to teach the change triangle. It's really important because once your child, children are born with all their core emotions ready to go and they start to use them to get their needs met. That's what they're for. And so if you're someone that gets terribly anxious around anger and you have a 2-year-old that's like, they tantrum and they're furious or they start to say, I hate you, you want to make sure that you don't get fazed by that the best that you can. And because the job of the parent is to help the child metabolize these feelings without abandoning and without retaliating, as Winnicott used to say. Like, if you hold one thing in mind, it's don't abandon and don't retaliate. And what that looks like is, maybe your 2-year-old is freaking out. They're so furious they can't have a toy. Just being able to say, wow, you are so angry. You really wanted that toy. I get it. Okay, here's another toy, or let's just be together. I'm not going to leave you. When you feel a little bit better, we'll start playing again. And just watching, looking, observing, and trying to attune the best that you can to what the child needs, and just trying different things that help their nervous system calm down. And sometimes it's just time. And same thing with all the core emotions, just making space and being a help. Like the older, wiser other that parents are supposed to be, who understand, that's the wisdom, what's happening with an emotion, and that there's nothing to fix. The kid is working properly, kid's nervous system. If they have to leave their play date's house and they're crying, yeah, it's sad. That's a loss to the child. And I can be present with my child, not indulging, not mired in it, but yeah, it's really hard. That's so sad. We don't want to leave our friend's house. I get it. That's it. And then let the kid cry, do whatever they want. Do you need a hug? Do you want to go play something else? Should we distract each other? What makes sense? A lot of it's common sense once you learn the basics of emotions.
I'm wondering what you can say about name it to tame it.
Yeah, name it to tame it. There's lots of research that when we know what we're feeling, it's like putting a left brain process on a right brain, or logical language on a right brain emotional experience. So that's why really the first step to experiencing an emotion is to knowing that we're having it. And sometimes it's very confusing. Sometimes it's easy. Yes, I know I'm sad right now. I know I'm angry. I know I'm afraid. I know I'm disgusted. That's the first step. But sometimes it can be a bunch of emotions can be mixed into a blob of anxiety. And I have one of my blogs is 2 deep ways to lower anxiety. And one of them talks about that when we can just be with that blob of anxiety and just tune into it, like the edges. If it feels too painful, just notice it in the body. What does it feel like? Tension, feels like jitteriness. And then just really slowing down, which automatically regulates anxiety. Even though anxiety pulls for us to speed up, it's again pulling back the reins, deep breathing. And then as you slow down and turn inward and deep breathe and give yourself compassion, what may happen is you may then be able to ask yourself, what's underneath this anxiety? And then I would suggest asking yourself, do I notice sadness there? Check. Do I notice anger there? Check. Do I notice fear there? No. Naming all the core emotions one by one, and then you know that each one of those needs your attention. You can't bundle them all together or we get anxious. And so that process of learning to name emotions, if that's not readily available to us, right, which originally we learned from our parents, from them there's a process called markedness you've probably heard of, where the parent, when the child is scared, like a little baby, the parent is able to imagine the emotion through empathy and say, oh, that was scary. The parent themselves doesn't get scared and demonstrate it that way because that's more scary to the child. So you don't want to be like, oh my God, that wild dog almost ate you. Oh, that was really scary to see that dog. That really was scary. Let me give you a hug. So that you're naming the emotion with this kind of parental voice so that the child knows that's what they're feeling, not that you're okay. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, otherwise then you're gonna make them more reactive, it can
More upset?
more upset. We can intensify things in our children for sure. Like little babies walk and then they fall and then they glance like it's like, am I hurting? Like when the adults react, then they cry. If nobody reacts, they're like, okay, you get up. Oopsie. They get up and they're happy again. They look at us for how to calibrate the feeling that they're feeling. Right? It depends. We don't want to catastrophize and magnify things, but we also don't want to downplay it. We want to meet them where they're at. I feel like it's so tricky, that's a hard thing to do if we were not taught that, right? As a parent, I feel like it sounds so simple, but it is not an easy thing.
Yeah, but our eyes are our best friend here, that if we weren't taught these things in children, and we're learning them now along with our child, we just want to see in the moment what's happening, not be in our history and our thoughts and what we think happened, but to be a tiny step behind our child. So using that example, the kid falls down and you don't really know if the kid is hurt. I think you could just pause and wait to see what happens. You could just say what happened. Oh my goodness, you tripped and fell down, and then wait. If it hurts enough, the child will cry, and then you'll say, oh, it's okay. And if they get up and walk, then you can follow that train. And learning in AEDP, we train on nonverbal communication. We're pretty good at listening. Most of us can listen to words that people say, but tracking moment to moment, because emotions are all facial expressions, body posture, tone of voice. I used to think people used to complain that I had like a harsh tone and that I was angry when I was like in my teens and 20s, and I would say, that's just the way I am. Well, then I learned about emotions and I realized that wasn't just the way I am. That tone was me feeling angry, or it was me feeling anxious, and I got what I call like my angry tightness because I was all constricted and I wanted to control something to make myself feel better, and I couldn't, and I had a tone. So we can start to educate ourselves into what emotions look like non-verbally on a facial expression. Most of us can identify a sad, frowny face, so that when your baby looks sad and frowny, you can say, oh, that was... You don't even have to label it. You could just say, aw, like you're there with them. And if you're pretty sure that a loss happened, that something is sad, like, I don't know, the dolly broke. Oh, it's sad when the dolly breaks. So, or to see an angry look, or to see a frightened look. Like we can start to do these cool experiments where you're just noticing people's faces. You can even watch like a fight online without the sound and just look at the nonverbal behavior. You can tell so much about what's going on without any words. It's all in the face. So there's many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. I feel like there's so much to deconstruct and go deeper and deeper into the shame even and the guilt we didn't talk. Maybe we can talk about another time, but I love this content. I want to be respectful of your time, and I want to conclude this conversation. How shall we end this?
I love that question. I have an answer right off the top of my tip of my brain. The way we can end this, I think, is this is a lot of content. And I want to just tell listeners out there that it just begins with a little bit of education to see if it resonates. So I would say not to get bogged down by any of it. And just if you like to read or listen, learn a little bit about the change triangle. The way that I think about emotions education is it's an intellectual education to see if something is resonating and worthwhile to learn a little bit more. Just like with everything, like if you take up knitting, you'll just try it for an hour and see if you feel like doing more or not. And then you learn in little bits, and then you don't even have to feel a feeling to learn about emotions. It's just like you don't have to digest to learn about how the stomach works. You can just learn about how the stomach works. So I just kind of want to conclude with a message to everybody listening out there to go easy on yourself, to not be overwhelmed by the content, and to just keep learning about emotions as though you were taking a little class, whether you read It's Not Always Depression, or Parents Have Feelings Too, or look at all the content that's on the internet. And then you can start by doing little bitty exercises, and there's exercises in the back of each chapter in both of the books. Because the hardest part is to dip your toe in the water and to get out of your brain. We're all stuck and jammed in our heads, to just start to notice what it's like to notice the body. And we can start with a good feeling, like, oh, I feel so happy. Next time you feel kind of happy or relieved, you can just say, well, what is feeling happy? How do I know? What is my body experiencing that tells me that I'm happy? And we're sort of like learning a new language when it comes to learning the body. None of us were ever taught that, but that is the crux of the whole biscuit, because emotions are physical experiences and we can't think our way through them. So I would say that's the takeaway, that emotions just are. They're not good or bad, they just are. And when we learn to work with them, things typically get better and not worse.
Thank you so much. I really love this conversation and your message. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Yeah, and the change triangle is a good one to learn and visualize and use as a tool.
Yeah, it's the single best tool and most helpful tool that I've ever learned in my life. And I don't think there's another emotional health tool around that captures all of human experience in a little two-dimensional figure that we then work for the rest of our lives. It's a lifetime practice. And the fruits come early, and then they get better and better as we get better and better at working the change triangle, knowing where we are and how to get to the next point, and then down to the bottom where we all want to spend more time in that delicious, open-hearted state of the authentic self.
Thank you so much, Hillary. I really appreciate your time and your presence today.
Thank you so much, Anna. It was great to be here.
That concludes today's conversation, my dear listener, and I hope you found this episode helpful and inspiring. Be sure to hit that follow button so you don't miss future episodes, and take a moment to leave a rating and review. It really helps others find the show. I would love to hear your thoughts and takeaways. Join the conversation in the Authentic Parenting Facebook group, or visit the contact page at authenticparenting.com/contact to get in touch. Authentic Parenting is an ad-free show, and your donations is what makes this podcast possible. Support the show by visiting authenticparenting.com/support or becoming a patron at patreon.com. Your contributions make it possible for me to continue bringing you weekly episodes. And as always, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. Until next week, I am Anna Seewald. Thank you so much for listening. This episode was edited and produced by Ami Noor. If you need expert support to bring your dream podcast to life, from editing to full production, Ami Noor can help make it happen. You'll find his link in the show notes.